All right, it's week 3 for the PTS patch notes, and this one is a banger. Very excited to share this with you guys. This is the second to the last week of the patch notes, so week 4 will be the last bit of changes, and then we'll have 4 weeks after that before it goes live on June 8th. So let's just dig into it. I'm going to skip a lot of the stuff at the top we've already gone over from the week summaries. They've talked about a lot of that already. But let's get into the combat and gameplay. Damage done to monsters. They've updated the values to the following effects after fixing their previous multiplicative effectiveness. So Tideborn Wildstalkers going up to 15% from 12. Besides Mania is going up to 15% from 12. Onsl's Torment going back up from 6 to 7%, and then 21% after interrupting. This is very interesting. The interrupt part now lasts 30 seconds as well. Any fight where you can get an interrupt off, like Onsl's, is going to be insanely good. It does take a decent hit, staying at that same 7% as additive damage instead of multiplicative, as far as it being just like a generic set and forget kind of set. I think there's going to be better options for that, like Yondir should outperform it in most scenarios. If you need the pin from Onsul, it's still decent. If you weren't really needing the pin and you were running it more just for the 7% bonus, I think, you know, Coral's going to be probably the best option in most of those scenarios now. Not everyone likes to play that mini game with Coral Riptide though. So I think Yondir is going to be a nice one to just slap on, set and forget. But Onsul will be okay. It is nerfed though from the last patch. However, if you can get an interrupt, this is stronger than Coral Riptide. So definitely situationally really good, and in, you know, most situations it's okay. Empower increased to 100% up from 70%. Empower no longer grants its bonus effects if Battle Spirit is active to correct interactions with passives such as Forceful and Trifocus in PvPvE situations. So this is good. I did do a little write-up on this because I actually still don't think this is quite enough. I'm glad they upped it because, you know, it was a very, very decent sized nerf to heavy attack builds, moving this 70% from additive to multiplicative. So I put a few notes here. So the break even point from buff to nerf is at around 43% damage done. So if you have less than 43% in your damage done modifier bucket, you should see a buff from this change compared to last patch. If you have more than that, then you'll see a nerf. So that might seem like a lot, but it's actually pretty easy to achieve even on the most basic setups. The Weapon Master Champion Point node is already 20% of it. Other damage CP, that's 6% for your heavy attacks. Minor Slayer is another 5%. Minor Berserk is another 5%. Your Sorc Shock passive, if you're playing as a Sorcerer, which a lot of the heavy attack builds are, that's another 5%. So already with just these basic things that most heavy attack builds will have, you're already sitting at 41%. So just 2% away from being in that nerf category. So that would give you less than a 1% buff. We're looking at about a 0.5% buff in this scenario from last patch. Any other buffs come into play and it's a nerf though. So like if you're in a group and, you know, there's Major Slayer or whatever, really, any Major Berserk, any other kind of buff going, you're gonna have still a little bit less damage than you would last patch because of it being additive now. And then if you're using the Void Mantle set, the Rakat's Void Mantle that's made for heavy attacks, that has a 50% damage multiplier that's also in this. So, you know, you would be at 91% with that going with these same other stats. And so that's a big nerf in that scenario. So because that set used to actually also be multiplicative. It was a 50% multiplicative, and they moved it to the additive category as well. So I think something needs to be adjusted here overall, either heavier buffs for Empower higher than 100%, something with Void Mantle maybe to be adjusted to be a little higher there, or maybe consider just going back to multiplicative with Empower. It's currently not quite landing, I think, where it should though. Born from Shadow. This is the buff on the Nightblade's cloak. It's for PvE monsters only. It pretty much is put there to give cloak a use in combat for PvE, because for a lot of scenarios, especially like running dungeons and trials and stuff like that, there was never really a good use for this skill, and it was like part of the Nightblade's identity, but it, you know, there's no reason to go invisible for 99% of the fights. So having this 10% on there was really nice, but it was multiplicative before. They changed it to additive, which really hurt it. Now it's 15%, which is still additive, but that's still a very nice buff. So yeah, Nightblade is eating pretty good with this one. Speaking of Nightblade, their assassination passive pressure points, it's got a little bit of a buff and a little bit of a nerf at the same time. So it now grants 2% crit chance per Nightblade ability slotted, rather than 2.5% crit chance per assassin ability slotted. So if you are a pure Nightblade, you will likely benefit more from this. If you are just using the assassination skill line from Nightblades, you'll get a little bit less out of this. So they did make a comment here. While we won't be updating passives always ahead of a class's refresh schedule, small targeted changes like this can help us correct some of the dominant behaviors ahead of time, while opening more opportunities for other builds to have a chance to shine. This should help pure class Nightblade a smidge, while also toning down slightly how dense the power is here. We don't expect this to drastically shake things up, but it fits our needs and is helping two birds with one stone. So this is good, yeah. And like they said, this isn't a drastic change to any build really, but for those pure Nightblades out there, a little bit extra crit chance when you're running various abilities from your different lines. So good stuff. I definitely like this change overall. Warden's Green Balance, Nature's Gift. This passive now activates on overhealing done rather than healing done at the behest of you all. So it sounds like they didn't necessarily want to do this, but people complained enough, and so they changed it. So this passive will also work with their class mastery, which we'll go over here in just a little bit. Dragonknight Ardent Flame, Shifting Standard. The visuals now last the correct time if you're wearing Elfbane. So Elfbane extends it by 5 seconds. I guess the visuals were stopping early on that. Werewolf. So lots of werewolf changes here. From week 1, we've seen a lot of good feedback and fair criticisms on the combat side of things, so we're making our first pass here. The big things we're trying to improve are making sure the experience feels powerful in PvE while being less oppressive in PvP. A lot of the adjustments you'll see will gently nudge up numbers in PvE while toning back some of the most problematic stuff in PvP, but utilizing differencing duration effects or values based on the context. Really great to see them adjusting this way. I think this is how balancing should have been going from the start, and I'm so glad that ZOS is now embracing this. It's making the game better, both for PvE and for PvP. We've heard some of the feedback on cleave damage feeling low, which is largely intentional. It should be up considerably from previous updates, but the werewolf is less about area devastation and more about single target hunting and burst. And I think that's fair for the most part. We've also seen some desire for ranged capabilities for tanks, and while we'd love to find something that makes sense both thematically and with the kit they have, range doesn't align with the experience of werewolves. Many of the suggestions of spawning direwolves to attack and taunt an enemy also lack a suitable home to be built in a performant manner, but we are aware of these wants and will continue to investigate solutions. Something we could investigate sooner is making Pounce in Morphs work with Deafening Roar's taunt upgrade, causing them to also taunt if cast while blocking, which we'd need to update them to be able to do as well. While they aren't able to be used stationary from range, they are a form of range that would let you quickly jump back and forth between enemies before clumping them up. I think this is a cool idea to add that on there. So as you pounce to the enemies, you also taunt them. It definitely makes it faster instead of having to pounce to them and then hit the taunt on them. You know, you have that all in one button. But overall, I really, even though these aren't things they're acting on right now, I really appreciate them actually giving the feedback on it and saying like, hey, we heard what you're saying. This is where we're at right now. They could have easily just not discussed this in the patch notes at all since there were no changes. And, you know, we wouldn't have known one way or another. Like, is this something they heard the feedback on? Is it not? Are there any plans maybe later? Like, we wouldn't have known, but I love that they actually wanted to talk about it, even though it's not coming right now. So I think the direction with the communication is just night and day difference from years past. So I really love to see this kind of stuff. The Werewolf Berserker morph. This morph's bleed now lasts for 4 seconds with a 1 second delay against monsters. And then, that was 2 seconds with a 1 second delay. Against players, it will last for 1 second after a 1 second delay. So little more wiggle room in PvE to not worry about that buff falling off if you miss a light attack or something. Against players, though, you're really going to have to stay on your target. Like that, they don't want you to just be able to keep that up easy. So this is, this is a pretty good way to do this, like to split those up to make the different modes work differently. I like seeing stuff like this. Then we have Nash, reduce the execute scaling of this ability and the rip and tear morph to 175% down from 200%. Bloody Nash retains the 200%. So, well, we'll get into it with the developer comment in a second. Rip and tear, this morph no longer gains the 25% bonus damage with blood hunger, but retains the increased healing effect. Reduce the base healing value by about 43%. So a pretty big nerf on the heal there. And you no longer get the extra damage from your blood hunger stacks, but you do get the increased healing from blood hunger. We're toning down how much damage and healing this morph offers compared to week 1 of PTS, since this morph was both out damaging the other morph and adding too much self-survivability to the werewolf kit. I think it's fair overall. That's kind of what I was alluding to. The Rip and Tear morph was dealing more damage than Bloody Nash because of the guaranteed Sundered procs. So this is probably fair that they got that, they at least try to get the balance between those a little bit better. If you get healing and major breach and guaranteed minor breach from Sundered with Rip and Tear, and you're doing more damage with it, it's like there's no reason to ever run Bloody Nash. But if Bloody Nash is a little more damage, and then you get all the cool secondary effects on Rip and Tear, I think that at least makes both of those morphs a little more appealing. Rending Claws, the Blood Claws morph, this lasts 6 seconds against players. Duration is still 10 seconds against monsters. And I think this is the first time we've ever seen this on a skill where it actually lasts a different duration against players versus monsters. Love it. Really, really cool stuff. Like, again, the ability itself is going to feel the same to use regardless of what mode you're in. You just have more wiggle room in PvE to keep this up and less in PvP. And I think changes like this are very helpful. Feral Cruelty fixed an issue where this passive did not apply its weapon spell damage bonus at rank 2, so that was bugged on PTS weeks 1 and 2. They now reduce the effectiveness against targets with Battle Spirit, so now you get a 10% weapon and spell damage bonus for PvP. You get 33% in PvE. So again, another split there where they are able to balance those differently, so it's not too oppressive in PvP, but doesn't get unnecessarily nerfed in PvE. Call of the Hunt, this passive has been gently buffed for non-maximum group sizes, primarily focused on helping the lone wolves. So this passive now reduces the cost of remaining in werewolf form by 16%, plus 16% for every transformed werewolf or direwolf in your group, including yourself, up from the base 20%. So this means in solo, your cost reduction will be 32% for your ultimate. So instead of draining, like if you don't have a passive in at all, it drains 100 ult every 10 seconds, as if your rampage is not going. So now, instead of draining 80 ult, it will drain, 68? So just making it a little bit easier, even if you're by yourself, to stay in werewolf form longer. So at higher levels, with more werewolves or with the werewolf pets out, it still caps at 80. But yeah, this is more just a change for if you're actually by yourself. This is really good stuff. And then they fixed some of the visuals and audio as well. They updated the markings to only become visible when Rampage is ready to cast. So I thought that was a pretty cool change. So you have these like neon, like war tribe kind of markings on you. They were kind of, I don't know, to me personally, they felt a little off-putting. Didn't kind of match the grounded aesthetic of a werewolf that we're probably used to. But having them be something that like comes out and glows whenever your ultimate within your ultimate is ready, I think is a really cool idea, and kind of like shows like, hey, I'm in the rampage right now. So I liked the idea of that. The intensity of the berserker morph markings have been decreased, and then a blue version has been added to the base werewolf transformation ability to provide consistent mechanical clarity for rampage. So you have blue on the base morph, green on the pack leader morph, and then red on the berserker morph. So great stuff with werewolves. Werewolves are going to hit like a truck for PvE. Probably still pretty good in PvP, I would imagine, even with the changes, but maybe not as crazy as they were. Like they were really, really strong on the PTS. So yeah, hopefully it hits a sweet spot for both sides. That'd be great. All right, now let's get into the class masteries. This is big. There's a lot of really good stuff here. All right. For the Arcanist, Ink Scribe's Verve. This passive now grants you and group members major force for 10 seconds when it activates. Increase the activation threshold to 100k healed or overhealed, up from 75k, to account for the new power it can grant. We're hesitantly adding a powerful bonus activation here, offering a named effect that groups normally build and coordinate around aggressively. This won't necessarily add power across the board, but it will help your group potentially run other ultimates or item sets if you can manage to keep Fate in your hands. Awesome change here for Arcanist support. Like, this is really gonna be something that's worth having a pure Arcanist in the group for. Like, essentially permanent major force, as long as you're steadily healing. Obviously, the more group members you have, the easier this number is to hit. But yeah, this looks great. And the thing I really like about this change is it doesn't really increase the high end too much. It might a little bit, like it might make them or allow them to move some pieces around a little bit to get a little more damage here and there. But really where the big impact of this is for like lower mid-tier and kind of like the mid to upper tier groups that don't have great uptimes on major force. Like, having an Arcanist that's able to provide that now is just, I mean, that's going to be a crazy increase in damage for those levels of groups without power creeping the high end too much. So I thought this addition here on this class mastery was really well thought out. And I also, I just love that it gives you a reason to like bring a pure class to the group. Like, this is a real reason to bring one. Like, we'll get to some of the others later that are a little bit lacking in that area, but definitely feels like Arcanists, you're going to want at least one pure Arcanist in the group. Then we have Fate Realigned. This passive no longer causes Crux to reapply or generate out of combat. So essentially you could just keep this up out of combat and your 30-second timer would never fully run out. So they just fixed that. So they don't want you to just be able to carry Crux forever. It's probably fair. Erudite's Rigor. This passive now inflicts minor cowardice on the attacker and major vitality to you and your group for 4 seconds, while granting you 1 ultimate per crux you have, rather than granting 1 ult and 200 mag and stam recovery. So another really good change to this. Minor cowardice is not too hard to source, but some of the sources are a little awkward if you're not running the shadow line, just because especially for AoE, you have to run like the 2-second channel from scribing. It's a little awkward. So having this as just something that goes onto your attacker automatically is, I think, a really cool change. And also, I mean, the major vitality to you and your group, that is a lot of extra healing for your group as well. So really, really nice buffs like this, and then the major force. Absolutely good reasons to bring like a pure Arcanist to the group. I think they did really good here. Moving on to the Dragonknight, Booming Voice. This is the one that interacted with Storm Voice. Passive now has a 15-second delay before the recovery bonus activates in efforts to correct the cases where the recovery was wasted. So yeah, before this was, you cast your ultimate, your Storm Voice passive gives you a burst of resources back all at once based on how much ult you spent. And then this passive was giving you recovery right away too. And it kind of felt like, this is the part where I need it the least, because I just got a big burst back. So having that delay to like kind of keep the recovery going after that window is, I think, better. Still don't really love this passive. I think it's okay. Definitely not as exciting as some of these other passives we're seeing, but Dragonknight already has a really good one here with lead from the front, gives major berserk and major protection. So I don't think Dragonknight's passives needed a whole lot. I will comment on their Wildfire Embers mastery. I think this needs to trigger off the first tick of Engulfing Dragonfire. I think if they just added that in, that would probably resolve all the current issues that we have with whip builds going way up, but Engulfing Dragonfire builds kind of staying the same, and in some cases going down a little bit. There's just not a good way for this skill to interact with the Wildfire Embers passive the way that whip builds can with the extra dots they have running. And we'll see later they nerfed Pyrobrand, so that makes it even worse for engulfing builds. Well, it's kind of not a big deal for whip builds. So just a lot of things going against engulfing Dragonfire builds with when it comes to the masteries. They just don't sync up nearly as well. Well, specifically Wildfire Embers. So I think if the first tick of this could trigger it, and they could even put a small cooldown there if they were like worried about people spamming this. I don't think that's a big deal. If you wanted to like keep block canceling it and spamming it to build up your stacks, it's going to be a DPS loss to do so anyway. Just like right now, you could just spam Talons or Searing Claw or something at the start of a fight and build up your stacks anyway. You can already do that. So I don't think that it would really be any different with this, but if they wanted to put some kind of short, like 3-second, 4-second cooldown in there just to make it where you couldn't do that, I think that would probably be fine too. But just have it so that every time you start your Engulfing Dragonfire, it triggers a stack of Wildfire Embers. I think that would be awesome and really just fit the whole vibe as well, because like you're breathing out this like big thing of fire. Like I feel like it should trigger your Wildfire passive, and currently it doesn't. Only the other morph does. So anyways, thought I would throw that in there while we're talking about the Dragonknight class masteries. For Nightblade, some really good stuff here. Above and Beyond, increase this passive's bonus to critical damage and healing done to 25%, reducing to 5% against targets with Battle Spirit. So instead of 15% in PvE and 7% in PvP, they've changed it to 25% crit damage in PvE and 5% in PvP. So much bigger split there between those two. So a lot of extra crit damage in PvE for Nightblades. And then increase the critical damage and healing maximum to 35% up from 25%. So now 160% is the crit damage cap for Nightblades instead of 125%. Absolutely huge. And this cap is also the same for PvP. So you can, in PvP, get up to that 160% cap. You just don't get this big cushion like PvE does to get to it. Like you'll have to sacrifice more in your build to actually stack up to that high of an amount. So that PvE, you have a lot more wiggle room and it's a lot easier to get there. I think that's fair overall, the way they designed this one. But yeah, overall, very, very nice buff for Nightblades. And then the Eye for Exploitation Mastery increased this passive's maximum weapon and spell damage to 2,500 up from 1,250, and damage reduction to 20% up from 12%. So another really, really nice buff for Nightblade. So these values are halved with Battle Spirit active. So essentially how this works is from 100% to 0% health, you stack from 0 up to 2,500 weapon and spell damage. So it's like kind of like Bloodthirsty. It just like gets higher and higher and higher as the target gets lower. But also on top of that, your damage taken from that enemy as they get lower and lower and lower increases. So, or sorry, your damage reduction increases, your damage taken decreases. So really cool interaction there to just kind of really like win over against your opponent as their health gets lower and lower. But yeah, that's 1250 with Battle Spirit active and 10% on this number with Battle Spirit active. So I think that's pretty fair. Cutthroat's Focus. This passive's damage taken effect now lasts 20 seconds against monsters. So this is when you dodge an enemy's attack, you put a 5% damage taken debuff on them for everyone in the group for, it was 5 seconds. It was kind of short, kind of made you have to like really work to keep that buff up a lot. So now it's 5 seconds for PvP and 20 seconds for PvE. And then Share the Spoils. This passive now grants 2 ultimate and magicka and stamina to all group members rather than granting 1 ultimate and resources to only 4. So another very nice change. Lots of extra ultimate for the whole team, not just 4 people, and sustain for the whole team as well. So really, really awesome changes here overall for Nightblade. Love what they did here. It should make them a lot more relevant than they were originally looking in weeks 1 and 2 of the PTS. All right, next up is Necromancer. Again, really, really good stuff here too. The effect now grants potency to damage done rather than damage done, making it apply to base damage calculations or multiplicative in simpler terms. Reduced the bonus against players to 10% down from 12. So how this one works is, here it is. Increase your damage done by 1% for every 1% more current health you have compared to your enemy. The bonus caps at 25%. So for example, if you have 75% current health, your enemy has 50%, you gain 25% damage against them, 12% if they're a player. So as long as you are 25% health above your enemy, so if you're at 100%, they're at 75 and lower, you're getting a 25% damage increase against that enemy. So what they've done, instead of that 25% going into the additive bucket, they have put that in its own bucket now, multiplicative. And that means it's a pretty nice buff compared to where it was before. The more sources of damage you have in your damage done bucket, the better this change is for you. So it can vary from like kind of a small buff from week 2 to 3 to a pretty sizable buff. But either way, really, really nice change here. And we have Malevolent Promise. This passive now forcibly triggers rank 1 of Corpse Consumption's ultimate, so 5 ultimate, ignoring its cooldown in addition to its existing effects. So this is the passive that whenever you consume a corpse, you mark the closest non-player enemy to you with Death's Touch for 6 seconds, which allows you to use a corpse consuming ability against them. Previously, so this can happen once every 2 seconds, and previously this triggered Death Gleaning, which gives you some resources back. It still does that, but now it also triggers the corpse consumption ultimate part. So this passive has a 16-second cooldown on it normally to get back the ult. This part of it you can just keep grabbing now. So every 2 seconds you can get an extra 5 ult as you're grabbing corpses. As a damage dealer, I don't think this is quite enough to be super intriguing unless you're playing more of like a support damage dealer build, but for support, you know, this could be a lot of extra ult. Pound of Flesh, this passive now has a 10% base chance of activating, up from 1%. Note that the calculation for this passive also occurs after taking damage, meaning that your remaining health percent will add up to this 10%, making it trigger significantly more than before. So not only do you have a 10% at the start, so let me go over this passive again, because I know if you're like me, most of these names you've forgotten what they do at this point. So this is the one that every 1% lower health you have a 1% higher chance to just heal for 10% health and 5% of your missing stamina. So if you have 50% health, you'd have a 51% chance for this passive. If you had 25% health, it'd be a 76% chance for it to activate, and so on. Like the lower your health gets, the higher chance this has to activate. So now they're adding a base 10% on top. So it gives it just a way higher chance to activate all the way through. And then also, like, let's say I took a hit that took off half of my health. Well, that hit would automatically have like a 60% chance or so, like at 50% health, to trigger that heal just immediately after it, since that's where the hit's taking me to. So pretty nasty for survival. Like this is gonna make necros super tanky, especially like if you keep like kind of getting in that lower range of health. Like you can just bounce back up really easily. Pretty cool passive. Doesn't really offer much for the group, but you know, for just playing for survival, this one seems really good. And then we have Veil's Forfeit. This passive now triggers when you heal a target at 66% health or lower, up from 50%. So this one previously, I think they renamed this one. Yeah, this was At the Precipice. So this was when you heal a target below 50% health, allows you to use a corpse consuming ability against them for 10 seconds. So you can tether to them. Consuming or replacing this effect grants the target 2 ultimate. So it was kind of mad. The condition below 50% health is kind of low, so not super appealing. So now they've upped that a little bit to 66% health. So they don't have to be quite as low for it to trigger. But if you happen to be healing someone and they're below 66, this will trigger and you can use them as a corpse. So pretty cool thing to just in the toolkit to have. Like it's a cool idea for a mechanic. But the kicker here is now just passively from slotting this class mastery, you get the major vulnerability from sources you apply increased by 50%. It's pretty cool. Like I do think they might have underdone this one a little bit. Like it sounds pretty good on paper, like, oh, an extra 50%, you know, like 30-second Colossus, major vuln, you know, Turning Tide can now be 15 seconds uptime instead of 10. Like it is somewhat nice, but compared to like some of the other classes, like group buffs they're bringing, it's actually a little underwhelming. I think it's, you know, you already have like good sources of long major vuln, so it's not really like the most appealing thing to have it increased by 50%. I saw a nice suggestion that this could work like the inverse of Yorvold's Guidance and increase the duration of your major and minor debuffs by 40%. So that would include major vuln, but like also hit like other debuffs as well. I think something like that could be a lot more interesting here, and pack a little more punch than what this is currently adding. It's okay, but compared to what some of the other classes are getting, I definitely think this one seems a little bit more boring. And yeah, I hope they can up that a little more in the future. All right, Sorcerer, calculated defense. Increase this passive's weapon and spell damage bonus to 6%, up from 3%. So this one is the one when you give shields. Well, we can look at it here. Sorcerer. You gain a damage shield for half a second anytime you begin to activate a sorcerer ability. And then if that shield fails to break, you grant you and your group members 3% weapon and spell damage for 20 seconds. So every time you're casting any Sorc ability, this is just constantly triggering with that half-second shield. There's bound to be enough triggers in that don't break to keep this up on a 20-second timer pretty easily. I thought it was pretty low before. It's still not anything too crazy, but 6% is still it's a fair increase to weapon and spell damage for your group. So I mean, I'll take the buff, but the passive is already pretty interesting for survival. I think having it give a decent group buff too is definitely the way to go, even if it's not quite as appealing as some of the other classes stuff. Conservation of energy, fixed an issue where this passive did not trigger off many abilities that did not require a target. So there's just a bug fix for that. That's the sustain passive. Sphere of influence, increase the try recovery bonus from this passive to 225 for 12 seconds, up from 150 for 4 seconds. So this one's pretty cool. Whenever you have a damage shield go out, the target gets another shield for 15% of their max health for 3 seconds. So like it's just like doubling down on the shields, and then you also give them extra sustain. So now that sustain is going to be higher, 225 recovery, or is it recovery or yeah, recovery. 225 recovery, and it lasts for 12 seconds. So a little bit more noticeable extra sustain from that. Again, not the most interesting. It's kind of light overall in the grand scheme of things, but the extra survival could be pretty cool, and like keeping people's resources up definitely can help in some scenarios. All right, then we have static reverberation. This passive now has a base 1% chance to activate, in addition to its 1% increase for every 1% missing health the target has. Increase the cooldown to 500 milliseconds, up from 200 milliseconds. So instead of being able to trigger potentially 5 times a second, you can now trigger it twice a second. This won't, that sounds really bad when you look at it that way, because 5 times versus 2 times is a huge nerf. The odds that you would actually trigger every 200 milliseconds perfectly and get 5 times a second are extremely low, even at the very low health portions. However, it's still a fairly decent nerf as you get lower in health. I don't think it's a dead passive, but this probably cut it in half, maybe. I mean, I need to see some tests, so I don't want to like speak too much on it without actually having looked at it. Hey, Hyper, thank you very much for the raid. Appreciate it. If somebody could give Hyper a shout out, please, that would be amazing. Thank you very much. Welcome in, everybody. So it's hard to tell without like digging into how much this was actually triggering within a second. But if I had to guess, probably somewhere in the like 50% of the damage it did before range, instead of like, it looks like a 60% nerf on paper, but I don't think it'll be that much of one. And they said this to reduce how powerful this passive could be, especially on non-pet builds. This should lower the crazy ceiling by a decent chunk while also tightening the gap between pet and petless builds. So I don't really understand that part too much, and I don't really understand the whole adding 1% base chance to activate. Like, so if I'm getting this right, like, let's say the target is at 90% health. I would have had a 10% chance for this to trigger, right? Now I have an 11% chance for it to trigger. Or if they have 50% health, instead of a 50% chance to trigger, I now have a 51% chance for it to trigger. Like, it just seems like, what was the point of adding that in? Maybe I'm just completely off base and understanding it wrong, but you know, at 100% health, you now have a 1% chance for this to trigger instead of a 0%. Like, so every 100 enemies I run into, this is bound to pop on one of them at 100% health now. It's just like, what's the point with that? I don't know. Like, if it was a base like 5% chance or something like that I can understand, like having some kind of like meaningful swing as you go through the numbers, but I don't get the 1%. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It seems mostly irrelevant. But we'll see. We'll have to keep an eye on this. I think this is still a decent passive. Obviously, it's not going to be crazy like it was. Maybe consider having the cooldown be per target, not for the passive, so that for AoE, this would still be a really, really strong passive. But yeah, other than that, we'll have to see how the parses are looking. But yeah, it's a big hit to this one for sure. One thing to consider though is this damage does trigger concussed a lot. So especially with something like the Shattered Path Signet, that is a lot of extra status damage as well. So even though you're losing a lot of procs, I do think this is still pretty strong, and I think maybe they hit it a tiny bit too much, but it should still be a good one to run. But that's it for the Sorc. Mostly good stuff here. I'm kind of iffy on this one. We'll have to see how it plays out. Templar's Judgment's brand increased the damage bonus of this passive to 1500, reduced to 750 against players, up from 1250, reduced to 625 against players. I think this is good. I don't think it's enough overall. I think if they would have done this and something else in the Templar kit, it would have been okay. We'll cover Wrathsun later. I have some comments here. Well, we can cover the Templar part here. They need better group utility compared to the other classes. The extra 300 weapon and spell damage for the group is fine, but that's also the only other damage dealer mastery. So it's going to be a damage dealer most likely that brings that, because that's what they're going to run anyways, because they don't have like another really strong offensive mastery. So the support one is already there for the damage dealer to run. So as an actual like tank or healer, not really much that's very appealing to bring to your group in the Templar masteries. And then, like I was saying, 1250 to 1500, I don't think that's a big enough buff on Judgment with no other changes. If there were some other tweaks too, I think that probably would be fine. But yeah, it seems just Templar seems a little bit behind the pack right now. And then I'll talk about Wrathsun here in a little bit when we get down to the class sets. Some really good stuff in the class sets section later as well. So hang tight for that. Warden, Bountiful Harvest. This passive now grants you and group members major heroism for 3 seconds and 125 mag and stem, rather than granting the healed target major heroism for 4.5 seconds and 250 mag and stem. Wow, this is a really, really great change here. Like, this makes this so much more usable than it was before. I mean, major heroism just constantly up. You just need to bring a pure Warden and you got it. Like, that's crazy strong, but like awesome at the same time, because like this doesn't take some crazy like group coordination and you know, maneuvering and all this and that to get this benefit. So like this will benefit a low end group the same as it will a high-end group, and in fact probably more, because in those high-end groups, many of your players, especially like on support roles, they were already having great major heroism uptimes. So, you know, while this is still strong for those high-end groups, because now the whole team is getting it, it is stronger for the, you know, the mid-tier, the low tier, even like the mid to, you know, mid upper tier, like range groups that are not getting all their supports with good uptimes on this kind of stuff. So this one here in particular, and also the major force here on the Arcanist, I think those are really nice to help kind of, I mean, it doesn't bridge the gap between the low end groups and the high end, but well, it does bridge the gap. I mean, it makes the gap smaller, right? It is a bigger improvement for the mid to low end groups than it is for the high end groups. And I love that. Like it, and not to say that the high end groups aren't benefiting. They're going to have fun with all this stuff too. It's great. They definitely are benefiting, but it's one of those scenarios where you actually are pushing a lot of the other groups up closer to what some of those high-end groups were already achieving. So I really like seeing stuff like this, and it's absolutely going to be worth it to bring a Warden. I think you probably have a Templar DD in the group as a pure Templar. I don't know about Necro yet. Maybe as a DD if their damage is strong enough with these changes. I don't really see a lot here support-wise that's making me want to bring one. Nightblade maybe for the damage. I don't think for support there's anything really standing out too much. Dragonknight for the major berserk and the major protection is going to be really nice to bring, and then Arcanist for the major force, and then the extra ult for your teammates, major vitality. Like I think they are getting close to accomplishing that goal. Oh yeah, Sorcerer as well. Yeah, I mean, maybe this is something where, I don't know, the 6% weapon and spell damage is good, but is that enough to bring a pure Sorc? That's something that might be a little tricky. You could maybe bring a damage dealer Sorc and run this instead of static reverb, and go as more support there. I have a hard time seeing like full Sorc healer or tank just for this bonus though, compared to subclassing. But maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe I'm wrong. But man, I think they're getting really close to like that point where you want an Arcanist, you want a Dragonknight, you want a Nightblade, you want a Necro, you want a Sorc, you want a Templar, you want a Warden. You know, like I would love if that was, you know, the actual meta is like, hey, we want at least one of each of these pure classes in the group to function properly and to get the best results, right? Like, I think they're inching towards that for sure. So really good stuff there overall. Most of the class mastery stuff, I really like what they did. Jury's out on static reverb. If that was hit too hard, we'll see. Obviously, it was overperforming compared to some other class masteries, but we'll have to see where that ends up. So the new Mythic Prowler's Talisman is just a bug fix. It's flagged as unique now. All right, class sets. Let's hop right into these. Ares Cry. This set can now stack between multiple users, correcting the conflicting design the set originally stated. Apologies to all the PvPers out there, as this means you can't have multiple dive bombing birdos on you if multiple attackers wear the set. We'll keep an eye on how frequently it happens, as the audio is quite loud. So this is a great bug fix. We discovered on PTS that you could only have one player in the set at a time, because the sets would not... you could just have only one debuff going. So they fixed it, essentially. So great set for Wardens right now. This is a really good one. Corpse Burster, really awesome changes here. Updated the damage of this set to disease rather than magic. This is purely a mechanical change, as the visuals remain the same. This set now always triggers the disease status effect. We've also seen the request to make this set be treated as a class effect, which we can't do because it already is. So that's pretty awesome. I didn't know that was a thing. I don't know if many people knew that it was already treated as a class effect, but awesome that it is. It makes sense that it is. It's part of the class set, so glad they're treating it that way. So most Corpse Burster builds are using Blighted Blast Bones, but little bit of a extra incentive for those that might be using Gravelord Sacrifice with this. It's probably not as common, but having that also buff your Corpse Burster more is kind of a neat interaction for sure. And then I guess if you're subclassing as well and have something like Solar Barrage going, that would also boost your Corpse Burster damage. I don't think that's going to be worth it in update 50 doing the subclassing stuff like that compared to the pure class buffs, but you know, in theory, stuff like that will work with Corpse Burster now, which is really cool. It now also always triggers that disease status effect, which is a good bit of extra damage too. So really, really nice changes overall here to Corpse Burster. I love what they did. Monolith, another Sorc nerf. So like, yeah, unfortunately Sorc caught the nerfs while the other classes were getting the buffs, but they reduced the weapon and spell damage granted per monolith to 100, down from 200. So instead of having like the nice proc set damage plus 600 weapon and spell damage, which to be fair was it was pretty high. Was it broken? I don't know. I don't think it was, but you know, it's hard to say a few weeks into a PTS. I still think 300 weapon and spell damage plus a nice proc damage is probably decent. It's probably worth running on a lot of fights and the best option for a Sorc for a lot of fights, but wouldn't be the de facto like put it on everywhere set that it was before maybe. So probably balanced a bit better. We'll have to keep an eye on it, see if it needs any more adjustments as people start testing things out with it. And then Pyrebrand, this is the DK class set. Increased the cooldown of the wildfire generation to 12 seconds, up from 2 seconds. We have the dev comment here. So the week 1 changes dramatically increased the power ceiling of this set, making it effectively best in slot in all cases. While we're okay making class sets contextually incredibly powerful, this was a bit too far ahead. This will also correct some of the behaviors we've seen with the werewolf parses, allowing us to balance the experience better there without having it become too powerful with this interaction. This reduction won't affect the pure class build damage over time build on Dragonknight much, but it will lower its effectiveness with other builds, which we'll keep an eye on, as we've heard the sentiment with certain builds like Flame Carver, Engulfing Dragonfire. So essentially what they're saying is they know that this nerf, it is a nerf, but for like whip builds, it's not really going to make that big of a difference. Essentially, the only difference is you'll stack up your wildfire a little bit slower now. So this will trigger it every 12 seconds, but your dots that you're casting, like Talons and Disintegrating Dragonfire, Searing Claw, all of these will still be triggering the wildfire as well and stacking it up. So it's, you know, someone was saying like, oh, it's now 240 seconds instead of 24. Not really. That would be if, you know, this was the only thing building it up, right? So it's just not going to build it up crazy fast like it was. But over a longer sustained fight, you'll still get crazy good damage out of Pyrebrand. However, for Engulfing Dragonfire builds, the Flame Breath, that skill does not trigger wildfire, and now this keeps it up less, and you also have less dots running that stack it up when you're running this build, so really just doesn't interact with it that well. So that's why I mentioned earlier the whole having it trigger Wildfire Embers trigger off the first tick of Engulfing Dragonfire, I think would be a really nice change there, and kind of not even the setups out. Like Engulfing's still going to be behind Whip. I think it should be, but not as far of a split as we're currently seeing, and would make it a little more fun to interact with the class masteries a bit more. But overall, still a great set, even with this change here. Soul Cleaver increased the duration of the new damage bonus to 20 seconds, up from 12 seconds. So this seems like probably more of a temporary fix, I would guess, until they get to the class rework and the siphoning line gets some love. Right now, the siphoning line is not super appealing for PvE. And, you know, to keep this set up, so essentially how it works is when you cast a skill in that line, you get a 12-second buff to all of your damage on top of the 15% damage buff to your skills in that line. So it sounded kind of good on paper, but unfortunately all of the siphoning skills, most of the siphoning skills are not very good. So essentially now, if you just wanted to run something like Debilitate, you can get your resource passive bonus for slotting it. You can just cast it every 20 seconds to keep the buff up here. And you also get more crit chance now that they changed the assassination passive to work with any Nightblade ability. So kind of like little wins all around for slotting something like Debilitate in your build. So definitely appreciate that going up to 20 seconds. Makes it a little easier to keep up and might actually be worth running on a Nightblade now, whereas it kind of wasn't before. Wrathsun fixed an issue where the set's mag recovery could appear to become stuck on your character in the character sheet. This was purely a visual error. So just a little fix there. They did comment on the feedback though. We've seen the feedback that this set is lagging behind, namely in PvE. Unfortunately, this is a larger issue we don't have time to iterate on within update 50. We'll certainly keep it in mind when the Templar refresh rolls around. So again, even though they're not doing anything right now, really appreciate them commenting on it and just letting the players know, like, hey, we see the feedback. We saw that you guys spoke out about this, and you know, it's not something we can get to right now. I will still say, like, even some kind of like just number tweak could be nice in the meantime if they can't make any big adjustments. You know, if there was something like while Battle Spirit's not active, your Nova is reduced by 50% in the cost, you know, something like that, just to like kind of band-aid it in the meantime. But if, you know, I understand if it's just not on the table at the moment. I do appreciate that they at least brought it up here. This change to Shattered Path was already on the PTS, so not really any change there from what we're already seeing with it. And then, all right, so not much left here. Just some fixes for the veterancy stuff, mostly like tooltip and UI bug type stuff here. What else? Challenge difficulty. They adjusted the calculation so the experience is more consistent across gear sets and positive, negative effects. I don't know exactly what this means, but if I had to guess, they're saying that the damage you deal is now going to be like a multiplicative modifier where you only deal 20% of your actual damage instead of the additive modifier that it was before, where you just had minus 80% on whatever you had already stacked up to, which in some cases ended up with you only dealing like half damage instead of like 20% or maybe even more. So I'm guessing that's what they're saying there. They didn't really come out and say it like that. They kind of worded it strangely or just kind of masked exactly what they adjusted, but that would be my guess. We'll have to jump on the PTS and actually take a look at that though. Then you'll no longer see the wrong difficulty on the load screen. Player housing no longer has challenge difficulty. And then they put a help screen thing in about that as well. Fix some achievements being in the wrong place. Armory station's been moved to Hughes Bane. Okay. The Thieves Guild Armory Station now has a proper icon in the antiquity menu. Fix some stuff with keys. Fix some stuff with housing. Yeah, I think that's about it. From here on, just kind of some audio, UI, questing, bug fix type stuff. So overall, very, very good patch notes. I'm very impressed with Zoss on this one. couple of little things we'll have to wait and see how it plays out, but overall, like, GG. It's looking to be our second really good major update in a row. So thanks for watching. See y'all in the next one. Bye.